this has been one of the most interesting, fluid, fun conversations that I've had.
Welcome to Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast. Rex is
Nice.
the writer of this fantastic book, the lead author for this
Actually,
fantastic.
I wrote the whole thing. The
Okay.
others, the way the business model works is that the companies that want to be linked to the thought leadership
Yeah.
underwrite the research.
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
Now
okay.
Great.
they're credible. I mean, they know that they
Yeah, they
know
know
the
their stuff.
stuff and they're credible and all of that. They they just didn't write it.
Gotcha. It's wonderful. Absolutely. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. When you see the little microphone in the lower right, click on that to learn more. We're so glad you're here.
I've got two new books coming out in March.
Oh, great.
What are they?
One is called Surviving the Storm, and it deals with seven key things that trauma disrupts for educate in schools. It applies to any organization, but it's specifically for educators.
That's fantastic.
And then I've got a companion book to Nudge for educators called Whole, and it moves more into the mental health and trauma side of the conversation. So surviving the storm is a more pinpointed, practical look at areas of disruption that trauma creates, and then how do you deal with it? And then the next book is called The Genius Spark, which is based on research back in the 60s that you and I were all geniuses at one time and we lost it. And now how do we refine it?
Information from Breakpoint Beyond.
Based on research that George Land did with 1,600 preschoolers. He
Wow.
was hired by NASA to create an assessment to select candidates for the space program in the 60s. And it was built on creativity. They felt that was the key trait they needed because when you are in space and things go wrong, you need to think creatively.
Right.
And so he tested it with 1,600 Head Start kids, 3 to 5 year olds. 98% of them tested as geniuses.
Wow.
So that prompted another, of course, the question, what happens over time? So he did a
Right.
longitudinal study. And by age 15, it dropped to 12%. By age 30, it dropped to 2%. Then,
Wow.
of course, curious, I wonder, was this just this sampling or is it broader? So he then assessed 280,000 adults and found it's 2%. So they
Incredible.
linked it to the education system. And so the most watched TED Talk of all time, Sir Ken Robinson, references the research. And It took me 5 years to find the source. So I first heard it through Ken Robinson. And the theme was, does education kill creativity? And it was so compelling, but I could never find the source of, it was a story, it was an anecdote in his presentation. It took me 5 years to find the source.
Wow.
When I found it, it was so aligned with the work we're doing with the Clifton Strengths, with performance science, and with the 7 disciplines of post-traumatic growth that we train on, that we created a whole system and an app around how to recapture your genius, how to find, develop, and recapture your genius.
Oh,
and
that's
it's
great.
an app now?
It will be an app.
It will be.
Yeah, and it'll be free coming out. Now, you'll have to buy the Clifton Strengths and get.
Rex's origin story. All right, so I definitely am sparked by this, and then I want to back up and find out what motivates you
Yeah.
in these pursuits, because that's what intrigues me, is how did he get there?
Yeah, it's the same thing it's the same journey for everybody. I'm trying to solve problems for me.
Mhm.
And Joseph Campbell says, one of my favorite quotes, I won't get it right, but he says, we don't start out to save the world, we start out to save ourselves.
Mhm.
But in the process, we end up saving the world because we become vital. And what saves the world are vital individuals. And so that vitality is what
That's
saves the
incredible.
world. But we're all in the hero's journey, right?
Right. gifting to others. It's amazing. We've heard that from a craft, that almost that exact same thing from a craft soap maker who was making soap because his child had eczema. And then from you at the level of systems thinking for education. And we've heard it from architects and engineers building buildings and knowing that they have trouble reaching outlets. And that's what inspired them to pay attention to accessibility issues. You know, that I think if you're looking to what feeds you and gifting it to other people, it becomes a real benefit. If you look to create things because you know better for other people, it's not a successful approach. They were just chewed up in the system.
I understood why my daughter with Asperger's and why my son with severe ADD
Mm.
were chewed up in the system. So the first book is called Humanizing the Education Machine.
Oh, great.
and then it moved into the mental health side
Mm-hmm.
and the repercussions of that. So all my research is autobiographical.
We just talked about this perspectives of the education system and how it doesn't support the whole person. It doesn't support excellence. It supports test scores and
Yep.
teaching to a
Yep.
grade. And then the other factor of kids coming into the classroom with trauma, not having enough food, not having clothes, always being bullied
Oh,
because they don't have the right things that they're wearing.
totally. Right.
All of that just diminishes any ability to be present for learning. And then on top of that, one last thing, the learning that has no relationship to their lives.
Right. Yeah, we provide the best 19th century education you can ask for. That's what we do.
Well, and it's from experience. So I am a adjunct professor at two universities, and the pandemic, any critical thinking that these students had prior to the pandemic is officially gone.
25 million kids left behind.
Kids are not coming back ready to learn.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the social and emotional skills. They don't have the ability to self-regulate.
Right.
And so we got to start there before you can even engage the head. And then the key years for developing social and emotional skills is preschool.
Right.
And
right.
if you don't get it in preschool, and this is economist Dr. James Heckman's work out of Chicago, you don't get back once you
Right.
get to school.
Mm.
That's about 12 million kids that when they get to their 20s will have a higher likelihood of incarceration, not maintaining marriages, not sticking with jobs. If you're not up to third grade reading levels by third grade, you just don't catch up. So they say, the first part is you learn to read,
Mm-hmm.
and then you read to learn. So that's going to cycle through the system. Now there's another key window. It's the math window. That's fifth grade. So we've got approximately half of the 25 million kids that in some way, shape, or form are just not going to come out the other end
That's
the
amazing.
way you and I came out. That's going to have a social cost and an economic cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and nobody is thinking or addressing that. We're talking about the learning loss. That's peanuts.
It's peanuts, right? Actually, we had this discussion about emotional intelligence for college. And one of the people that we talked to is a college professor, longstanding college professor. And he was adamant. He's like, the university system is going to go away if we don't understand that it's emotional intelligence that we need to be teaching in college, because kids can learn what they need to learn online when they're in their 20s.
Absolutely.
As far as facts and programs and process, but they don't have any other place to learn how to work as a team, how to judge, how to apply discernment about making decisions, how to read the whole complexity of the situation. None of that is taught, and none of that is really testable. Leading indicators.
Well, so there are leading indicators,
Mm-hmm.
and the leading indicators are interest, relational cohesion,
Mm-hmm.
engagement. So some of those we can assess. They're soft, and psychologically safe environment. You can measure that.
Yes.
So there are things that are leading indicators, but we don't measure that. We always measure lagging indicators.
No choice but to change.
We were in a school district in Corpus, and so this was a school that was down in the bottom 2 or 3% of all the schools in Texas. So
Mm.
it was kind of like no choice but to change. So an organization came in that was really good at this socialized learning model.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did they improve their scores, but one of the things that was really emotionally touching for me is that some of the kids had special needs. One had severe autism. They were able to function in a small team setting. One kid in particular hadn't spoken in a couple of years. In this particular classroom he was in, he actually presented at the end of the
Wow.
semester. So that's what a group, you know, that's that emotional intelligence
Yeah.
that you don't get when you're just learning this way. The kids can figure it out. The kids can help build a
That's
team.
fantastic. Spatial transitions. If it's okay, I'm gonna geek out a little on the
Yeah,
architecture and design
absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
We're in an industry where the developer rules.
Whatever the shape, the footprint, the size,
Mm.
it's going to be what the business model tells you it has to be from a developer standpoint. So it's designed in reverse.
If you're a building owner instead of a building leaser, you
Right.
can definitely see the benefit to how that space changes and how that space and the organization of the company can support the workers. If you're plugging your company into class A office space or class B office space,
Right.
you have very little control. What control aspects can be pushed?
Right. Right. Well, so since the pandemic,
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's the other thing. We don't even need buildings anymore, right?
with the mental health challenge,
Oh,
one of the things we've been thinking is that the secondary spaces may actually become primary spaces. So think, for example, the entry in the reception area.
mm,
So part of what we think about is one of the things we have to do, and it's in nudge, is we want to reduce stress, right?
right. Yeah.
Okay. So what are the stress points along the way? Well, one is I had a commute, I'm stressed, got all this stuff on my mind, and then you walk straight into work.
Right.
You're Where's the transition point? So if you go
Yeah.
up to Canada, for example, to uh,
Mm.
there's in Edmonton, I think it's Edmonton. There's a school that has oh, what's the learning style called? I always get it wrong. It's called
Is it Montessori?
no, it's not. But it's all around social emotional literacy. So the
Okay.
first thing that happens is the kids come into a circle
Mm-hmm.
and they greet each other.
Yeah.
So they create positive connection. The next thing they do is the teacher gives a roadmap of the day.
Yeah.
The next thing they do is they break into groups of threes and they do a little warm up game, a learning game to get them into the thing. So what's happened is it's lowered the stress, it's improved the serotonin,
Mm-hmm.
it's created a little dopamine, and now you're conditioned to do the cognitive load strain.
Right.
And what we've measured through the pandemic is that stress reaches a certain point where it shuts down the prefrontal cortex,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
and there's just a fine line. There's a fine line between stress that is performance based and stress that is distress based. But most of the stress in the workplace is distress.
Think of it as a series of sprints. Mm.
So we
Wow.
we have to get breaks from that because it accumulates,
Mm-hmm.
just like an athlete. So we've learned this through sports. You know, I've got the swoop strap, I've
Yeah.
got the aura ring, I've got something under here that
You're
measures
all
my
plugged in.
blood sugar at any
Yep.
point in time. We measure all this stuff, and
Yeah.
I'm a certified tennis professional, so I've been following. And the
Wow.
big thing they learned about 10 years ago in sports was that they were overtraining,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's
Hmm.
called overtraining syndrome, similar to adrenal fatigue. So what they found is that you that the day should be a series of sprints, and you should be all on and then all off.
Yeah.
Microsoft did research about stress on going to back meetings,
Hmm.
and what they found is that the beta waves, as you go from meeting to meeting to meeting, continue to accumulate.
Mm.
And so you become less effective as you go on. If you
Yeah.
take a 10-minute break in between those, you stay at your original baseline. You have
Okay, so
enough time.
I'm really proud of myself because I just started at a new company, and I'm leading an office, and that's why I've been re-engaged with Nudge, because I'm finding some fantastic information in here. But
Hmm.
I wanted to meet with all 50-ish of the people that are in that office, and I scheduled 45-minute meetings with 15 minutes between them, and I took those 15 minutes between them. It was
Nice.
really important. And I
Oh,
found the whole process just, I mean, I would maybe have eight meetings in a day that were content based, and it still felt okay because I had that time.
you
And you
got to have
mentioned in
that time.
Nudge that 90 minutes is kind of like the cap. You can
Yeah,
focus for 90 minutes and then you need to step away.
it's called an ultradian rhythm, right?
Yeah. Some information on trauma impacts.
So going back to your student examples, what's happening with the kids with trauma? Didn't get a good night's sleep. Brother was up all night, shared a bedroom. The older brother plays video games, or the
Hmm.
parents aren't happy, or I didn't eat, or whatever it is, or I had to get up an extra hour early because my parents commute. They go in tired, fatigued. They don't have any capacity. So you give them a math problem,
Oh, God, yeah.
they're already here in terms of load, strain.
Hmm.
We all
Hmm.
have a certain amount of stressors we can
Hmm.
take. And we all know when we're tired, we're not as benevolent with people as maybe we could be.
And then they don't even have, I mean, all right, there is a capability of me to recognize when I've reached that point. And if I'm paying attention to my own health and well-being, I can send up a flare and say, look, I'm right on the edge. I know I'm going to say something wrong. I need to step away. But it takes courage to do that. You have to be in a safe place to do that, and you have to have
You
already developed that emotional intelligence to
yes,
do that.
you have to have the skills and the discipline and the habit.
And
It,
the comfort zone to do that. I mean, because I couldn't do that in a place where I wasn't appreciated or my job was at risk.
sure, right.
No way. But a
Yeah,
student, depending on the age, I would suspect that most students through high school haven't even gotten to the point where they're able to develop that skill set, and yet we're
yeah.
demanding that from them on a daily basis.
Well, and it also goes that the teachers who are quote teaching, they you this is
they're
a
they're human
this is
too.
a this is a being skill. It's
Yeah.
not a cognitive. It's not a
Yeah.
learning. So if the teachers aren't practicing and taking this self care, and that's the book whole that we got into,
Oh, that's
the
great. I
the
gotta get that.
organization that's probably the top in the country is called the Momentous Institute,
Oh, I've heard it. Yeah, that's wonderful. Great.
and
Oh, I'm very excited.
and they make sure the teachers experience the same kind of self care that they're supposed to give to the kids.
Just a check in.
So just to check it, are we talking about what you wanted to talk about?
Oh, you know
Because
what?
Oh,
All
we
of
love
this is
everything.
fascinating.
okay,
We just meander.
I
We're good with it.
okay, all right, because we just kind of launched, and I said, okay, we're good. Well,
Rex,
I'll
your
just riff.
knowledge base and the fact that you're releasing new books, we want to make sure that we point to those as well. I mean,
Right.
Oh, okay,
we
great.
started with Nudge because this is my experience of you,
Yeah.
and I have to tell you that I'm pitching this to the entire leadership of the firm that I'm with now.
Oh,
And
cool.
there are so many parts and pieces in here that just ring so true.
Hmm.
And then the point is to, I like the way you've got the leadership nudges in here and the personal nudge. There's little instructions,
Yeah, right.
check out this nudge, right? So happiness first.
So in the book, was there one piece that you related to the most that said, "Ah, I got this. This hits me right between the eyes"?
I think that the whole chapter on happiness has to come before health
Oh
really
yeah,
got me, because
yeah,
I've done this personally. I've focused on health. I eat incredibly healthy, but I still am a higher weight than I need to be. I walk, and I love the time that I spend walking with my husband. How do I protect my happiness? Because you really can't maximize or optimize everything else until you have that
yeah.
joy. And I think we treat happiness as fluff and nonsense, but it it really is the basis of just about anything. And when I run across somebody, well, in my old job I wasn't happy, and so that impacted things. In my new job, I'm exploring with people what makes them happy.
Hmm.
And what's your purpose?
So I'll give you a little window
Okay.
into finding happiness.
All right.
Okay. So when I was working, so during the pandemic, my business, of course, did a major change, pivot.
Mm.
Instead of flying and seeing people, I had 54 trips in 2019, business trips. Uh,
Wow.
Zero up
Mhm.
until October of last year, and then it seemed like everybody decided, okay, now we're going to have conferences. But what it gave me the opportunity is see people consistently instead of just coming in once for a workshop.
It's true.
And
True.
and so I saw them up and down.
Mhm.
And when they were down, I would ask, okay, so what gets you up in the morning? What's your purpose?
Mhm.
Guess how many people were able to tell me out of 150 people?
I would say very few people don't commit to a purpose, right?
Nero,
Yeah.
I would have guessed two.
Zero. Okay, good. Zero. Here's why. Here's why. And this I think will be a little bit of game changing for you.
Sing off key.
We have looked at finding our purpose as something outside of us,
Oh yeah.
something we do, right?
Mhm.
Something I want to do, put my passion in. Here's what Maslow said. Now this is going back 70 years ago.
Mhm.
He got it right from the beginning and we didn't listen. What he said was we're all born with an innate sense of what we're capable of becoming,
Mhm.
and we have to move in that direction. What we can become, we must become, was his mantra.
Uh,
And he developed this ladder, which we've misused. It was kind of a it wasn't we get here and then we can get here. These are the progressions, and it wasn't linear. It was we're
mhm.
up and down in all of these. And there was another level beyond self actualization, which was self transcendence.
Mhm.
So if you look at what we're doing now with the Clifton strengths, and if
Mhm.
we tie it back to the genius principle that at one time you knew
Yeah.
what you were original, what made you different, you weren't afraid of it, you would sing off key, it didn't matter
Didn't
when you were a
matter.
kid. And the Clifton Strengths measures the strongest parts of your brain, which you naturally do best and enjoy most. So if we tie it all together, becoming the best version of yourself
Mm.
is the road to happiness. And it doesn't matter what you do.
Right.
Everything can be used to push you to become the best version of yourself. And so, new book, two new books, an app, and a
Yeah.
ranch is pushing
It,
me more than you can know in ways, and exposing the things that in ways that I have to deal with. And but what it's building is more resilience for
yeah.
whatever comes next.
And isn't it wonderful, you're being vulnerable in reaching for those things and working toward those things, and the vulnerability builds strength and builds the confidence and moves you in the direction that that is the purpose. I think that's just brilliant.
Well, not brilliant. I made a mistake with my wife when we were driving by this house, this ranch.
Uh-oh.
It's this thing that hits you that you don't expect, and you can either say yes to it
Mhm.
or you can say, nah, not this time.
I
Right.
think it's incredible. We just had a conversation a few weeks ago with somebody who was talking about the same hierarchy of developing your full complete the self that you're supposed to be. And I think that so the universe is pointing to me to to look inward and find out what that is, because once you hear something a couple of times that you've never heard before,
Yeah,
what's
that's a
what's that
sign.
saying?
It's a
That's a
sign.
sign, right? Post traumatic growth.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with post traumatic growth.
I am not.
So we know what post traumatic stress is, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. And there's four basic levels of trauma. In 1995, they began the Kobe earthquake in Japan. They
Mm-hmm.
noticed that there was a certain resiliency that they didn't expect because of the devastation of the earthquake.
7 key disciplines.
So the first one is what we call the resilient mindset.
Mm-hmm.
The resilient mindset is composed of grit, growth mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and gratitude. Those three things.
Okay.
And a lot of stoic. So you're seeing a lot of new, like Ryan Holiday and stoic philosophy, Navy SEAL. You're seeing all this.
Yeah.
That's a lot of that's that part. The second piece is doing what you naturally do best on a daily basis, playing to your strengths. So that's the Clifton strengths or the character strengths. That releases positive hormones,
Right.
dopamine, endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin. So doing that daily is rejuvenizing and knowing how to do that. The third is your circle of 5 key relationships.
Yeah.
Most people have less than 1.5 key relationships. So all heard about the loneliness epidemic, but
Yeah, it's
you need
huge.
5 solid, good relationships that are there consistently to not only encourage you, give you a shoulder, but to give you a boot in the butt. Um, Now, one of the ones we've added is energy.
Okay.
So it's sleeping, eating, and movement.
Yeah.
Another one is meaning and purpose. So
Yeah.
and
I find
so
that huge, you know.
and it is huge. And the pandemic's knocked that down for a lot of people.
Mm.
The next one is progress. So feeling that sense of making progress on a daily basis, not
Yeah.
being stuck. And the last one is practice, the disciplines, the habits.
That's
If you ask an environment, how does it contribute to those? Then now you've got design criteria.
the last one, practice. And I think it ties into an attitude I want to cultivate in me and cultivate at work as well. Practice implies that that there's a lot of iterations to things, and you have to be unafraid of learning in the process, which means sometimes you're going to do things wrong.
Yeah.
And there has been a culture for at least 3 decades of, you practice until you're perfect, and I don't believe there is such a thing as perfect. It's different for every single person. So why don't we celebrate what culture perceives as missteps, as learning moments, and get used to the idea of practice. Practice is the journey itself, it's not the culmination, right? What's your practice?
And there's another side to it too.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's your practice?
Right.
What's your daily practice? What's
Mm-hmm.
your weekly practice? What are the things that you iterate every day? What are
Yeah.
the things that you iterate on a weekly basis? What are the things you iterate on a monthly basis?
Yeah.
Because those are your fundamentals. It's,
Yeah.
it's like my son who's a pianist. When he comes home, what does he do? He does the scales.
See, that's
He,
awesome.
he still does the scales all the time. So those basic disciplines, and I think the skill for the 21st century is the skill of habit making, the habit of habits,
Yeah.
and how do you do that?
Well, that's marvelous. Can I ask how old your son is? Your sons are?
Yeah. So Nathan is 28,
Okay.
and Tyler is 22,
Great.
and then Michelle, who we have a grandson now. And
Okay.
so I told the boys that she's just kind of elevated herself on the will side of things. So It's not a closed deal, but I'm just letting them know. Uh, so about 4 months ago, we had our first grandchild.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So who's your hero, Rex?
Well, so my hero is my dad, and he's
Yay.
not with us anymore. He died last year.
Oh,
But the other character hero I identify with is Captain Miller in Saving Private Ryan as the
oh,
quintessential servant leader. So,
servant leader. That's a
yep,
fantastic term, servant leader. I think
yeah.
people have forgotten that, especially when we think of politics.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So, excellent. Thank you. And what should we all focus on? And I always ask this question horribly, so
I don't feel like I do it any better. I've really got to work on it. So if the entire world could just stop and focus on one initiative, one cause, one direction for a little while, what is it that you'd like them to pivot and focus on?
Yeah, well, for me, it's real straightforward. Local community, build relationships in your backyard with the people you know and the people you can influence. Build the social capital. Go to Columbus, Indiana, and discover what social capital is about and what it can do. But that's it. It's all about who's your neighbor. It's the it's it's the basic fundamental, and we've lost that. That's
we've
one
lost
reason
that.
why we moved out of a subdivision into a small community so that we could actually be part of a community.
Yeah, yeah, because that heals you. It creates resilience for your neighbors. The thing in it, when Hurricane Sandy hit, Superstorm Sandy, the biggest benefit was having a good neighborhood structure that was resilient.
Right.
That's wonderful. And you have conversations then that are real and supportive.
You do, and unfortunately, the crisis kind of breaks all the walls down and makes us neighbors for a
Mm-hmm.
while.
Yeah.
And the sad part is we lose it so quickly.
And that's a wrap. I so much appreciate the time you spent with us, Rex. This has been
Such
wonderful.
a pleasure. Thank
It's
you.
been an absolute pleasure, you guys. This has been one of the most interesting, fluid, fun conversations that I've had, and it wasn't the three questions. What did you mean on this chapter? What did you do here? It was just a conversation, which I appreciate.
Oh, I'm glad you appreciate it. That's what really, that's what gets us excited. Learn. This has been Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast.
We
Take
appreciate
care.
it. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
And good luck with your opening.
Yeah.
Thank you.